Hello, everyone. Welcome to CXO Spice. CXO Spice is a platform where thought leaders share their point of view on innovation and explain how to make it happen in the real world. I'm your host, Helen Yu. Today's topic is AI at work for government. Our special guest is Mia Jordan, Global Go-to-Market AI Executive and Industry Advisor at Salesforce. Hello, Mia. Such a pleasure welcoming you to CXO Spice.
Hi, Helen. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So great to have you here, Mia. Before we dive in, though, let's have you introduce yourself and your role at Salesforce.
Prior to my role, really quickly, just to level set, I spent more than a decade in federal service, including two CIO roles, as you mentioned, first at USDA Rural Development and then later at Federal Student Aid. Across both my roles, I stayed pretty consistent, but my focus today at Salesforce, and I've been here about 4.5 years, is to really help our customers focus on delivering better service to citizens while working within the constraints, right, that government leaders face each and every day. And whether that's limited budgets, workforce shortages, and legacy systems. I specialize with leaders who face those same realities that I certainly faced when I was in government.
Well, with that background, Mia, having sat on both sides of the table as a federal CIO and now as an advisor, you have a unique lens on what's changing. So let's start there, right? What's the single biggest shift you've seen in how government leaders think about AI in just the last 12 months?
Oh, goodness. I think the biggest shift, Helen, is urgency.
Hmm.
I can't stress that enough. A year ago, most conversations were centered a lot on experimentation, right? So we've had two AI executive orders, one from the Biden administration, one from the Trump administration. And a year ago, we saw agencies raising their hands to run pilots,
Hmm.
right? They tested models. And they really just wanted to kind of understand the technology that companies like Salesforce was providing. Today, though, I think the conversation centers a lot more on operations.
Hmm.
And that's where leaders, and I don't just mean CIOs and chief AI officers right now in government, I mean all leaders in government really want to understand AI inside the mission,
Hmm.
inside the workflow, and ultimately inside the daily work of their teams and how we can accelerate that in a leaner government.
That shift in thinking is real, but thinking differently and moving differently are two separate things. So the data shows where government is on AI adoption, but where are the gaps, right? What's holding agencies back from moving from AI pilot to full production?
So today, I think where we find ourselves as a platform that serves across all industries, manufacturing, um, real estate, sales, point of sales, retail, and government, the same realities keep kind of presenting themselves. One, that citizen expectations are rising. Two, the government agencies are not just being evaluated any longer against other government agencies, but they're being evaluated based on a consumer or a constituent's last experience. And that last experience could be with a retail organization or with an insurance company.
Hmm.
So right now, leaders, I think, are asking very different questions, right? Um, that I think will speak to the gaps that you have asked me about. The biggest barrier right now that I see is not the model, so to speak, from an AI perspective, but it's the architecture.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is that many agents run pilots on isolated data sets. They're not really thinking about AI from an enterprise perspective. So the models perform well, but the challenge really appears when they then try to scale
Hmm.
across the enterprise. And the gaps that show up is data access because the work to connect the data hasn't been done. Secondly is integration. And that is that, AI has to operate inside mission workflows. So if it can't connect to case systems or communication channels, it can't help take action. And then lastly is governance. And our customers come to us, I think, repeatedly looking for help and understanding of what are the guardrails that they should be considering for privacy, for security, and for accountability more than anything right now. So even though those are barriers, when those three things come together, that's where we see pilots move into production quickly.
Hmm. Actually, that's consistent with what I've seen as well, right? Knowing the barriers is half the battle. The other half is seeing what it looks like when agencies break through them. So, and your recent world tour gave us some compelling proof points on exactly that. So let's get specific. Walk us through the new success stories from major federal agencies being showcased at World Tour DC. What problems are they really solving that we couldn't do that without the agent force before?
So, two that I'm really excited about, strong examples: Department of Labor, Veterans Health Administration. Most people, I don't think, when you say Department of Labor, I don't think that they really know what that means.
Yeah.
But if you've ever been without a job, you know the purpose that
Mhm.
the Department of Labor serves. They operate a national contact center that supports something like 28 programs across a really large department
Wow.
where millions of workers and employers rely on this contact center.
Mhm.
So, what they couldn't do before was get citizens faster answers. They needed staff to really focus on complex issues instead of just kind of repetitive inquiries, really, using the knowledge and experience of that staff to really focus on the things that required that level of expertise, but also that cases now, because of Agent Force, move through the system faster. What people don't know is that the Department of Labor now has an agent called DOLA, which I think is
Mm,
cute.
love that.
Um, and DOLA now provides 24-hour support for citizens. So it was, before you may have to get your answers between 9 to 5, right?
Mhm.
But now it is answering both common questions. It's collecting intake information, it's opening cases, it's routing requests. And so the impact now is immediate. And so I think that's a really clear example of how AI is acting on behalf of the agency, not just assisting the agency.
Mhm.
So that one, I love the DOLA example. VHA, Veterans Health Administration, serves about 16 million veterans
Wow.
across more than 100 medical centers and outpatient facilities. And so, with a massive amount of customers, their challenge was coordination. They really were struggling with information and decision making moving really slowly. So now they are in a place where they have created a technology stack in using Slack,
Mhm.
Salesforce data, and AI. And so now what happens is when an operational issue is flagged, the AI automatically gathers the relevant data and brings the right experts together in
Mm.
Slack. And so what this has done is saved thousands of staff hours from just kind of repetitive work into more direct veteran care. And that really is the bottom line.
I did not realize how big of scale it extends to, right? 16 million, that's a lot of veterans, and then 28 programs for Department of Labor, so kudos. Those examples actually bring the concept to life in a way that's hard to argue with. And they also point towards something bigger, a different way of thinking about how work gets done in government. So you've introduced the idea of an agentic enterprise and agentic work like OS. Can we dig in a little bit deeper there? And what does this concept look like in government?
So the term agentic enterprise, I think, can still sound rather abstract, right, to our customers. But the way I like to explain it is really simple. So if you think about how government work happens today, employees jump between systems all day, from email to case systems, spreadsheets, document repositories, right? You name it, they probably are using it. So a lot of time gets spent hunting for information. And I really want to stress the word hunting for information, because if leaders were to survey their staff, they would find that finding the right information takes up the majority of their day. I live that as a federal employee, and I live that as a CIO serving my stakeholders. The agentic enterprise changes that model. So instead of people chasing information all day, AI agents actually bring the information and the actions together in one space.
Mm.
And that's how we've come up with this notion, or this new term called the Agentic Work OS. And that's where you go and do your work every day. We are drinking our own champagne internally of how this works in Slack, how we, as a company of, I think, 80,000 employees,
Mm.
are leveraging this work OS to be more productive, and to reduce the amount of time we go looking for information.
Well, congratulations on doing that, right? So that's really a compelling reimagination of how government operates. But with any significant transformation, the impact on people, the workforce is always the most important question to answer honestly. As this transition happens, there will obviously be an impact on the workforce and how government work gets done. 5 years from now, Mia, how will government work have changed, and how can agencies manage that change?
So, in Mia's opinion, I think 5 years from now, government work will look a lot less administrative
Mm.
and far more analytical. So, I liken that to when I was a CIO, some of my best people spent hours processing routine
Mm.
transactions, reviewing applications, reviewing, routing requests, right? Responding to the same questions.
Mhm.
AI agents, I believe, are going to absorb much of that work. And so that means that employees can then spend their time where we like to say human judgment matters most: policy decisions, complex cases, helping citizens navigate difficult situations, right? And so the agencies that succeed, I think, will treat this as a workforce evolution,
Mm.
right? Right now, people are very much focused on AI as this technical implementation, and not really considering that it is a workforce transformation in terms of how the work gets done.
Mhm.
And that is the real shift of this technology. So, what I would leave you with on this particular question, Helen, is that leaders need to show employees how the technology is going to remove the friction from their day to day and
Mhm.
allow them to stay on the work that actually motivates them to join public service in the first place.
That's a salient point, right, Mia? In that, let's unpack a couple of dimensions here. And the first one is, how do you see the role of government worker evolving, right, in the next 3 years as AI agents become operational?
So, myself and a colleague have been using this term called swivel servants instead of
Mm.
civil servants, swivel
Okay.
servants. And that's because you're constantly in all of these different tools and applications to do your work. And so I see government workers will move away from task
Okay.
execution to what I'm going to call mission orchestration.
Okay. I love
Okay.
that
And,
term.
and
Yeah.
so instead of doing every step manually, I believe employees are going to be able to guide AI agents that execute routine work,
Mm.
where the employee becomes the reviewer, the decision maker, and the person responsible. So this isn't about replacing people. We are very staunch in that belief, but we are focused on how our agents can amplify what people can accomplish.
Mm. I love that, right? Mission orchestration. I'm going to start using that if you don't mind. And then,
Please do.
how do you see AI agents transforming the way government agencies deliver services to constituents? And what role does cloud infrastructure play in making this transformation possible?
The biggest impact is speed.
Hmm.
Is speed. And I think it's really important, at least from my vantage point, that as organizations are looking to deploy AI to understand the ROI associated with their investment, they really have to understand how long did it take to do the work in the first place,
Hmm.
to be able to notice that speed, that AI agents and just AI in general have become a force multiplier, a mission multiplier. So right now, Helen,
Hmm.
most people who interface with government say that they wait a lot. They wait for responses. They wait for
Hmm.
case reviews. They wait for information to flow between offices. And I believe that AI agents are going to shorten that cycle pretty dramatically. I also believe that agents will be much more involved in like screening applications and answering common questions. I'll
Hmm.
highlight really quickly the city of Kyle, Texas.
Hmm.
Their AI agent name is Kyle,
Hmm.
Agent Kyle. And so common questions, he or she is able to answer those questions,
Yeah.
24 hours a day, and then route requests to the correct office without the citizen having to repeat that same information. So, cloud infrastructure makes all this possible because it connects the data and the systems securely. And
Mhm.
so without that connected infrastructure, the agent can't see the full picture. So that's where we are wanting to really not just help our customers from a CRM perspective, but our other products in our portfolio speak to the fact that you need integration, right?
Mhm.
And you need collaboration to make all of this happen.
We need more agents like Dola and Kyle, no doubt, right?
Yes.
The
Yeah.
internal transformations, one side of the coin. The other side is what all this means for the citizens government exists to serve. So what
Yes.
will it look like in the future? In the future where agencies are agentic, and how will citizen service and experiences change?
I think that citizen services are going to just become simpler. And I think that's the point, right? So many systems, and I am guilty of this, but I've learned, right? I've been a student throughout the decade that I spent in government. More often than not, older systems that the public has to interface with have been built from the people who do the work on the inside's perspective. Now there has been a true shift into how do we remove people feeling like they have to navigate government instead of just receiving a service, right? We don't care how the box gets shipped inside Amazon. All we care is that it's supposed to be there the next day, right? And so in an agentic um, environment, the agency, I believe, is going to recognize that he's going to recognize the citizen.
Mhm.
They're going to understand their situation, and then they're going to guide them through the service. So that means that the application process becomes faster, questions get answered immediately, and that, again, people don't have to repeat the same information over and over. So the outcome that we are all hoping for is that government just becomes easier to interact with.
I love that, Mia. That citizen-centered vision is so powerful, but realizing that vision requires the right people with the right skills, ready to lead the way, right? So let's talk about that, what that takes. What are the most in-demand skills government agencies need to develop right now to ensure they aren't left behind in this agentic era? And how can agency leaders help their teams successfully scale up?
Oh, wow. I think three skills matter right now. I think the first one is data literacy. I
Mhm.
think employees need to understand how data informs decisions and then how AI systems use that data. I think that's really, really important. I think the second one is what I'll call AI supervision, in that employees need to know how to review AI recommendations, and then how to maintain accountability. And then the third one is workflow design. This is where I think leaders need to rethink how work moves through their organization when AI then starts handling the routine tasks. The most important role that leaders play is participation. And I've learned that from being at Salesforce now the last four and a half years. Everyone from the CEO down is participating in how we roll out our own technology internally. They become the demo example, right? They are able to demonstrate how the technology gets used. And so if leaders then use the tools themselves, I think then the culture will shift quickly. And I think that's the point. So often tools are adopted from the bottom up, and that leaders aren't necessarily engaged.
Mhm.
With AI, it's the opposite. I think leaders need to lead the way.
I love that, right? Leading by example. But the three things really highly relevant: data literacy, AI, supervision, and workforce
Yes.
design, right? And let's close. I learned so much from you already today. Thank you. And then let's close this with something I always love asking practitioners who've been in the trenches. So what is that one totally unexpected lesson you've learned, well, while integrating AI into the public sector over the last year?
Oh, so in the deployments that we've had, the unexpected lesson, especially when I hear the out briefs of when a customer goes live, is how quickly government employees are embracing the technology once they see it working, right? I think there's a common belief that the workforce is going to resist AI, and in my experience, the opposite is actually happening. People are already playing with these tools outside of work.
Mm,
That's just reality, right? But in our case, when employees see an AI agent take over repetitive tasks that used to consume hours, they recognize the benefit immediately. And so I don't think the real change, the real change isn't adoption. I think it's just making sure that the data and the systems are connected so that the technology can perform its job effectively. And that's been kind of the substance of the outcomes that have been shared with me.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, Mia. So, here are four key takeaways from our conversation today. Number one is the mindset has shifted. Right now, execution must catch up. Government leaders are no longer debating whether to adopt AI. The challenge is moving from pilot programs to production at scale. I love the two examples you shared, right? Department of Labor and VHS, right? That really closing the structural and cultural gaps with those deployment. The second one is the Agentic enterprise is a new operating model, not just a new tool. Agent Force goes beyond automating tasks and is reimagining how government organizations are structured, how workflows and how decisions get made. I'm pleased to hear there's Agent Dola and Agent Kyle out there already.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
three is workforce transformation is a leadership responsibility, right? You talked about leading by example. The agencies that will succeed are those whose leaders proactively invest in reskilling, redefine roles with intention, and bringing their people along rather than leaving them behind. Three skill set,
Yes.
right? Very resonate with me. Data literacy, AI supervision, and workforce design. Lastly, the real measure of success is the citizen experience. Technology is the means, not the end. 5 years from now, the question isn't about how sophisticated your AI model is whether the person filing the taxes, applying for aid, or accessing a benefit felt the difference. So
That's great.
Mia, yeah, thank you so much for such a grounded and forward-looking conversation. Your experience on both sides as someone who has led agencies and now helps them transform, give you a perspective that's rare and unique. So we're so glad you brought that to CXO Spice today. And thank you everyone for tuning in and stay hungry, stay bold, and stay grateful.